we have Eko Annan, who's Vice Secretary of the Parliamentary Press Corps. Let me go to him quickly to tell us exactly what it means as the International Day of Parliamentarianism. Good evening, Eko. Thank you so much. Delighted to see you join us. Right, Eko, I think we're having issues with your line also. So we're just going to try to reconnect and get it to stabilize. So we'll be back to you in a moment. But Jonathan, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. Have you ever heard about the International Day of Parliamentarianism?
Well, I think it is, I must surprise you. I think this is the first time I'm hearing something of that sort.
I see. So you wouldn't be in a position to know exactly what happens on that day?
I am not even aware Parliament itself has ever been celebrating something of that sort.
Right. Well, I'm going to find out from Honorable Mustafa. But apparently, every year, June 30, which is today, is observed as the International Day of Parliamentarianism. It's supposed to also commemorate the date on which the Inter-Parliamentary Union, IPU, was founded. I'm not sure if the Parliament of Ghana observes it, but let me find out from Honorable Murtala Mohammed. Honorable, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you better now.
Honorable, what is the International Day of Parliamentarianism? Have you ever heard of it? Has the Parliament of Ghana ever marked it?
Well, Parliament of Ghana marks it rather solemnly, actually. And when I say we mark it that way, is that statements are made on that day, and it is a day the Speaker reminds us of the importance of the day. As a country that has decided to part the charter, to charter the path of democracy, it is important we recognize the significance of the day in our case. We live in a country that we have experienced military takeover. After we had independence in 1957 and the First Republic in 1960, it was truncated. We have had our democratic governance truncated at least 3 times. And since 1992, this democracy we are practicing seems to have a very long life, and it is our hope that it lives longer. So any celebration that recognizes the importance or the significance of that day ought to be celebrated, and I can tell you that Parliament recognizes this day.
Interesting. That's quite some background over there. I also just found out that the modern concept of parliamentary governance is credited to the Kingdom of Great Britain. So when we observe June 30 to honor parliamentary systems of governance, that's pretty much a backbone to democracy. Let me go back to Eko Annan, whose line I think has stabilized. Can you hear me now, Eko? Okay, Eko, I think your network is unstable, but I'm hoping that you can join us and contribute to this discussion. I'll go back to Jonathan Otri. I think you have a better understanding of the International Day of Parliamentarianism now.
Yeah. Well, it is not as if one will not be abreast of whatever it contains. My position is that I have never seen our parliament celebrating something of that sort. And Honorable Murtala, I don't know if it is more or less like an afterthought, because you're saying that it is solemnly done. It means that it is not something that they trumpet it. So it's like something that is inwardly done.
Yeah.
But then you recognize that it is something that is important for our parliamentary democracy, as it were. So I think that I have not seen or heard our parliament, trumpeting something of that sort to the hearing and listenership of the entirety of Ghanaians. And so that is why it appears a novelty to me.
Yeah. Maybe... Sorry, were you responding to that, Honorable?
Yeah, what I was saying was that, can I...
Sure, please.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the fact that he hasn't heard doesn't mean that it hasn't been. In fact, I was in the seat parliament, and I can tell you, on that day, statements were made on the floor. On that day, the speaker at the time, which was Honorable Duajeho, took the opportunity to remind members of parliament of the importance of the day. That I can tell you. Of course, this parliament, this is just my first year in the 8th parliament. And today we're all in committees. In fact, a lot of us were in committee meetings. So we didn't take my time on the floor. I came to the floor to ask questions. I had to leave my committee meetings to come to the floor to ask questions. And that is one thing many people are unaware. Sometimes when they look into the chamber and the chamber is empty, the conclusion is always that members of parliament are not in parliament. But committees are like the workshops of parliament. And we spend 60% of the work we do in parliament is done in the committee. But people judge parliamentary work on the. Yes, sir.
Please, can you use your button?
Right. Okay. So, sorry for that interruption. I will go back to Honorable in a moment. He seems to be on the move while speaking to us, so there are bound to be external interruptions. Jonathan, let's look at Ghana's parliament as a whole. When we look at parliament from the political perspective, what would you say their role to development is?
I think, by and large, we've not performed badly, but we still have a long way to go. Probably we have been blessed, as it were, by this hung parliament, and this is the first time probably we are seeing an opposition that is well positioned, as it were, to debate and to challenge, policy directive of government, especially the executive, as it were, and first time of seeing an opposition person emerging as a Speaker of Parliament. But if you look at situations where we have had bigger majority, as it were, like the 7th Parliament, like the 6th Parliament, and so on and so forth, Parliament has not been that effective. And I understand the committee situation, as Honorable Tala was suggesting, but you will see that most often than not, hardly do they come out and oppose, as it were, the bill that are sent or put forward, or loan portfolios that are put forward, before the plenary by the executive. You hardly hear voices of opposition. The other thing that maybe we are yet to see, the likes of PC Apiofori, where he was able to take on his own government, and so on and so forth. We are yet to see, people of such caliber on both sides. And that in itself does not make Parliament a little strong. That is my view on that particular. Because other than that, sometimes, government comes out with certain budget composition, as it were, and you just don't understand the philosophy behind such a policy. We need to interrogate the philosophy behind. But the parliamentarians of the government side will only go back to their rooms and complain. But when they come out publicly, they just cannot in any way oppose, what the executive has brought. But of course, we can easily blame the organogram of the 1992 Constitution, as it were, where it has virtually, made Parliament a kind of an appendage of the executive, as it were, because once the executive have to appoint about 2/3, from Parliament in terms of ministerial portfolios and other things, obviously people will be jockeying for positions here and there, and that in itself would never make Parliament a strong house. And these are some of the challenges that we are facing.
Interesting. More of a strong house. I think that would benefit everyone. But let me go back to the lines to Kina Likimani, Director of Special Programs at Odiko. I'm going to come later to Honorable Murtala because I would like to have a response to having a more active Parliament, listening to more interrogation, even from people of the same party, of policies, and being very engaging in the House of Parliament. But let me get Kina Likimani's position. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, so we're just discussing the role of Parliament in development. Just look at Ghana's Parliament. First of all, have you even heard of this International Day of Parliamentarianism? Are you involved in it in any way? And what do you think?
I have heard of it, but I think that the Honorable is right that a lot of these days are, you know, the Day of the Child or whatever, Women's International Day. These days are marked by statements on the floor of Parliament on the day that these issues, any of these issues are celebrated. However, given that this is a day for Parliament, I think it would be nice, even more than nice, it's prudent that Parliament has activities that engages with citizens on this day, because it is their day. You know, if people make statements on the floor about International Women's Day, that's fine. But even International Women's Day, they have programs. But so when it comes to this particular day, I think, you know, the more attention should be paid. The Public Affairs Department should have some events around the country to engage citizens. This remains a challenge. There are many challenges in Parliament, but this issue of engaging citizens continually, you know, they have starts and stops. Sometimes they have programs that is going on, and then it stops and you don't know why. But on this particular day, it seems like it is, you know, it's like a ready-made day for them to use the day or even the week, because one day is too small, too short, to engage with citizens. So that it's a missed, let's say, it's a missed opportunity.
Kina, when you say citizen engagement more with Parliament, what kind of channels do you think could we use to engage better with Parliament? You want citizens directly on the floor of Parliament contributing in the House, or you want them to take more opinions externally? Okay, I think today we're having issues with the lines there, so we're just going to move on from Kina, but we'll get back to her shortly when we have a more stable line. So let me come back to Jonathan. Jonathan, if you're still there, Kina was just asking for more citizen participation in Parliament, especially from parliamentarians, to engage better with Ghanaians. Wouldn't that be something? But how can this be done? What channels can we use as citizens to engage better with Parliament and to contribute directly to policy formulation?
You see, the problem with our Parliament today is that they hardly engage. Now, they only engage when they need the votes of the people. But when it comes to policies of government, as it were, a government is bringing e-levy. Now, is it out, what should I say? Will it be out of order if you want to conduct some town hall meetings with your constituents and give them the nitty-gritty and ask them, for example, as it were, as to how they think you should vote? Now, when they have voted and they go to Parliament, what happens is that they are representing the parties. They are not representing the constituent which gave them the mandate. So you see, there is that disconnect between the constituents and those representing the constituent, that is the Parliament. So if you have an International Day of whatever parliamentarism, you know, and you do not have a situation where parliamentarians would take a day off, for example, they should have planned it ahead of time, a day or two, engage, educate, bring Parliament to the doorstep of the people who gave you the mandate. That would be a better way of celebrating, you know, a day, you know, earmarked for parliamentarianism. You see, other than that, it is just much ado about nothing. Statements are made. That's why I said, how many Ghanaian citizens are aware of this particular day? How many? So it is just unfortunate that they've not been able to take advantage of such a day to bring, you know, issues of governance to the doorstep of the people. So sometimes you don't know whether they intentionally keep the masses in the dark so that they will continuously manipulate us. Other than that, most policies, most controversial policies that come to Parliament, of course, spearheaded by the executive, parliamentarians ought to engage their constituents and find out their views, so that when you go and there's a need for a secret ballot to be conducted, you have listened to the views, the popular views of the constituents, after you have explained to them. That kind of engagement is something that is not there. All what we see is partisan parliament. And people, a parliament is supposed to have a deliberative function, to deliberate, to philosophize, and to account. Let the executive account through the questions that you put at the plenary, to let the executive account to the masses. These are some of the things that our parliament ought to do. So if we have a day such as this, and the lady rightly said that a day is not enough for something of that sort, maybe you could see that they did not even plan anything for that particular day. That is why I told you in some kind of cynicism that I'm not aware of something of that sort, because where lies the celebration if only statements are just made? And how does this parliamentarianism, feature in the lives of the very people who give the mandate to them to become parliamentarians?
Yeah.
Nothing of that sort is present.
I'll come back to you specifically on the duties of parliamentarians to the people. But let me engage Kina again, because her line is more stable. Kina, I was just asking, because you made a point about more active engagement between citizens and Parliament. And I wanted to find out if you had any recommendations for what channels, what manner should this engagement take?
Well, I think that the last speaker has said it. It's not a difficult concept. If you have an institution, a governance institution, who understands that it is critical and it is part of how they represent us to engage us, then those of us who are not MPs, we don't even have to come up with suggestions. But like the speaker said, the posture of Parliament is not to engage with citizens. And this remains, it's, the lack of engagement with citizens also follows the line of representation. We understand, of course, that people come to Parliament on party tickets, so there will be some party politicking, but the Parliament largely subsumes its representation of the people and under the representation of the party. And so this thing where people that we have elected, whether at the executive level or at the legislative level, once elected, do not want to face the people, do not want to engage the people, it's a disaster completely for us. It means that, because if you don't engage the people, how do you know what they think, what they want, whether you are doing a good job by them or not? Just like the speaker said, we, the people, brought you to Parliament. Ghana constitutes, without Ghanaians, the citizenship of this country and the country itself, we would not have a Parliament. Ghana constitutes the Parliament, and Ghana is represented by its citizens, and MPs are supposed to represent us. So I could list any number of activities. That's not the point. The point is that the ordinary, the ongoing posture of Parliament is not to engage with citizens. Because it's not enough. This whole thing about even committee meetings, right?
Right.
And they will all tell you that the majority of parliamentary business is committee meetings. Committee meetings are not open to the public. In other countries, with the exception of state security committees on security, the committee hearing sittings are open to the public. South Africa does that. But in Ghana, it's not open to the public. On top of that, the reports that come out of the committee meetings are summarized. So you don't know which MP on the committee, whether they liked it, whether they agreed to whatever agreement or policy, nothing. we also, like the previous speaker said, do not have an understanding whether they are themselves understanding the policy that the executive wants to enact, the acts that the executive wants to pass. All of this buttresses the point of a lack of engagement with citizens and the bigger issue of ineffective, inadequate representation of the people. And if you don't do that, then we are not going to get what. I mean, sometimes you have to wonder why we constituted a parliament, but it's our democratic way, and we will eventually, I hope, get this right. But it's a big problem on our part, of this part of Ghana's parliamentary system, that they do not, there's a posture of lack of engagement with citizens. So,
right.
The programs, there can be so many different types. And I suppose under Right Honorable Peter Alajete, we had a better functioning parliament. So we know it can be done. The programs can be run. But still, MPs do, like the previous speaker said, they do need to go routinely and seek the input of their citizens, of the people who brought them into parliament on issues of policy, to help us understand what does this mean for us, this thing that we are going to pass, exactly how is it going to affect our lives. And all the bills passed in Ghana must lead to inclusive development, must lead to our freedoms and better justice. Our court of arms says freedom and justice. It doesn't say freedom and the law. So we pass a lot of laws that do not lead to freedom and do not lead to justice. And they are the ones doing it. So they have to make us understand. They have to explain themselves to us, and we have to make input. But
in line with what you're saying, would you say this disconnect is because Jonathan did mention that Parliament seems to be holding itself more as an extension of the executive than actually representing the electorate?
Yes, and that has been, I think, one of the great misfortunes of the posture and the stance of our parliament. Because the parliament is an essential, it should be independent, powerful institution of our democracy. It is the parliament has functions that only it can do. Only parliament can hold the executive to account. So that particular function, no other institution in Ghana can do. Only Parliament. So when Parliament consumes itself to the executive, it does a disservice not only to Parliament itself, but to us as the people. And sometimes it boggles the mind. And it's not even something that the Constitution promotes the independence of Parliament. Except with the exception of, that 30% or whatever that they have to get the ministers from Parliament, which at Sodiko, we really want that to be taken out of the Constitution. But, and so sometimes you listen to the debate on Parliament on the floor, and MPs are speaking as though they were ordinary citizens. They will speak like us. They will be like, this is a problem, we should do something about it, or they should do that. Well, you are empowered to do something about it. The only thing that Parliament is empowered to do is appropriate funding to bills, to policy. But they can pass private members' bills. The Parliament can itself decide that, for instance, sanitation and drainage is a problem, and we need to come up with a road plan and join up all governments to follow the road. Parliament can do this. It's a very powerful institution on paper, and it should be so in practice. But in practice, it isn't. It isn't as powerful. It's not. And, even some of the, Public Accounts Committee, I think they've been sitting, and I think they are looking at reports from like 2019. It's just not on. Because even to oversight the the reports from the Auditor General's office, it should be timely. But by the time you have called people to come and face you because there's been some malfeasance, the people have retired or time has passed. And in addition, the Parliament is empowered to take some of these issues or corrupt practices that has been identified by the Auditor General. Parliament is empowered to move that forward because Parliament is a powerful institution. And if we add up all of that, it comes to a lot of money that Parliament is allowing to let slide out of these audited reports. So the Auditor General, do they always doing their job? Parliament is not following through. So it's you know, our democracy is young, but there are so many things that we are not doing properly, and we need to do that properly. Because again, then ultimately, it's the citizens of Ghana that loses out. And so if we constitute a parliament, they should act right by us. And should be, because if parliament is not powerful, or parliament lessens itself, it's to our detriment, and that is what, you know, and that does not move development forward. We don't get what we need out of our democracy.
Right. Thank you so much, Kina, for that. I'm going to come back to you in a moment, specifically on the conduct of Parliament. I was just watching some of the footage, seeing when Parliament erupted into fisticuffs. I want you to give us a bit of your side on the conduct of parliamentarians with reference to that. But let me go back to the line. We have a call on the line. I'm hoping his line is more stable now so I can engage him. Eko, can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you now.
Okay, so we're discussing the International Day of Parliamentarianism. Most of the people we're speaking to have never even heard about it, do not understand how it's marked. Honorable Murtala Mohammed was speaking to us earlier that is usually solemnly marked in Parliament. But what is emerging is that people would expect a more engaging commemoration of the day, especially in citizen engagement with parliamentarians, explaining to citizens how to be more active in governance and to get more input from the people. Is this what you would say is, you would expect on the International Day of Parliamentarianism?
Well, rightly so, we would have expected that this parliament would have done more, get more Ghanaians abreast with what this day really means. Earlier in the day, there was a statement on the floor of the House by the MPs, and several of them contributed to this statement. They talked about how important this International Day of Parliamentarianism is to Ghana's, forward march or Ghana's style of democracy. They talked about the fact that without Parliament, Ghana really cannot function very well because Parliament sits at the heart of our parliamentary or our democracy. So really, as you said, we would have expected that this parliament would have done more, considering how they are split. We would have expected that they would have done more, gone down to engage more with people to, inculcate in them what really this day is all about. But then again, you cannot fault them because the Speaker of the House, the Speaker of Parliament, Aban Bazaine, is in far away Israel on an equally important engagement. Probably if he was in town, I'm sure he would have, got them to, really mark this day. But because he's not in town, his first deputy speaker himself is also not in town. So, I'm sure the second deputy speaker was overwhelmed, and so they didn't really put in place any proper thing to commemorate the day. No.
Eko, what would you say is Parliament's contribution to development?
Well, so from 92 to now, I'm sure we cannot belittle the role of Parliament to our country's developmental agenda. This Parliament has shown glimpses of being the Parliament that has shown glimpses that it can help us to really demand more accountability from the sitting government. From 1993 till 2020, we saw how governing parties enjoyed absolute majority and they controlled the House. Now, this particular Parliament, the 8th Parliament, has shown that it's hung in nature. The antecedents of the dawn of century goes to prove that if really these MPs, put their mind to task, they would help the ordinary Ghanaian to demand more accountability from government. Have they been able to achieve that? Have they been able to do that? I'm sure this verdict, we need to leave it to the ordinary Ghanaian. There is a talk that the minority in Parliament that's supposed to really champion this whole accountability agenda, ends up, lifting the morale of the ordinary Ghanaian. We can make mention of how the whole conversation surrounding the approval of ministers played out, as well as the conversation on the e-levy, the processes leading into the passage. We saw how the minority flipped up sentiments of the ordinary Ghanaian against these two very important, the approval of ministers as well as the approval of the e-levy.
Now, you mentioned these specific approvals, and you say, I mean, they whipped up public sentiment. They seemed to be very active in debating it, but when it was critical, they staged a walkout.
Well, so they told us that it was part of their strategy. I mean, that strategy really didn't.
I see.
Make sense according to what some are saying.
Yeah.
But some feel that because they whipped the sentiment of us, of the ordinary Ghanaian, they should have really gone down to the wire with that particular portion. They shouldn't have, even bad. And so that is when we say that we leave the verdict to the ordinary Ghanaian to, they will be the best judges of this particular, whether or not the minority in parliament or this East Parliament has been able to really hold this government to the accountability, thing.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, we know that walkouts are very legitimate forms of parliamentary protests, but how does it help the people? Let me go back to Jonathan Autry. Jonathan, we have seen a few walkouts. We have seen parliaments go down to actual physical blows in parliament. Does this behavior engender confidence?
Okay.
Jonathan, did you hear me?
Can you come again?
Excuse me. So I was saying we have seen in Parliament some walkouts, especially when it was critical to be present for policy discussion. We have also seen Parliament go down to physical blows in the House. And my question is, does this posturing engender confidence from the people?
I think so. Now, the point is that it would have been very much easier for the party in government to have a walkover on the minority, as it were, because they would have had the numbers. Now, they don't seem to have that. And if you look at the posturing of the minority, and you take e-levy as an example, all surveys that were done, not less than 90%, not less than 95 and beyond, were for this. The Ghanaians were opposed to something of that sort. And you could see that engendered confidence in the minority, as it were, to oppose constantly by using all manner of, strategy, as it were, to oppose that. Now, at the last hour, they decided to walk out, which was in itself a good strategy. But by now, you have rather put your faith in the very court that you think that you have been done by over the period. So, a look at the emergency situation, the urgent need, I see that the Supreme Court ought by now to have dealt with this e-levy issue and how minority, those who send the issue to court, think that it was done unconstitutionally. So I don't know how long is the Supreme Court going to take, because when it came to somebody challenging the issue of quorum, within a twinkling of an eye, the Supreme Court had ruled. So it fuels this kind of perception of selectiveness on the part of the Supreme Court. But I think that so far, the minority, they have stood their grounds. They've been able to engage. Unfortunately, fiscals have, they have had something of that sort that was not worthy of it. But if you think that you are doing that as a way of protecting the Constitution, then some of these statutes are allowed. But of course, not to the point where somebody will be injured or somebody, will die out of that process. And so I see that there is that kind of confidence in the minority. Gone are those days when they will say that you will have your say, but the government will have its way. This time around, it has not been easy for government. And one other thing that I've seen about Parliament, which I think is a deficiency, is that they're supposed to learn some oratorial skills that will allow them to be able to convince the other side to see wisdom in whatever position that they are putting before them. The idea that the bravado of bulldozing your way through because you have the numbers, as far as the 8th Parliament is concerned, is gone. But you don't see that. You don't see that from the side of those arguing on behalf of government. We need to see superior argument. There is a need for them to do thorough research and then tone down in terms of partisan speeches. Because if you don't have the numbers and you want to run your government efficiently as a way of always stretching olive branch to the other side, then you need to acquire these oratorial skills. And that in itself, when you speak, the ordinary citizen will understand and appreciate where you are coming from and see that you have a superior argument. And by that, it will rather make the minority look awkward, because then they will be opposing for opposing sake. And that in itself will also not inure to the benefit of the minority in terms of parliamentary fortunes going forward. So they have really done well. Not two ways about that. It is not everything that will go their way. They will lose some, they will win some. But you see, they seem or they appear vindicated. If I'm still using the e-levy, for example, because you have somebody who is, a stalwart of the party, though not a member of government, but close to the president, bemoaning the condition of the e-levy. It has not succeeded because the records are all over Uganda and all those Kenya and other places that indicate that it has not been a success. But you see, because the executive has always had its way over the legislature, things of that sort still get passed.
Okay.
And that in itself is a problem. As I said, it makes the legislature more or less like an appendage. We need a parliament that will there should be a dichotomy. If you're a lawmaker, you're a lawmaker. Do not go lobbying, but that will also call for an amendment, of our constitution, as it were. And as a nation, we should see that should be a need, so that a parliamentarian is divorced from lobbying and putting, certain strategies in place, as it were, to kowtow to the executive in order to get a position as a minister or deputy minister and so on and so forth. This thing did not augur well for our parliamentary democracy. And I think that, I don't know when we are going to change. When you are in a position, the language you speak is different. You find yourself in government, the language you speak is
completely different. Right, and thank you, Jonathan.
You come back to a position, you seem to know everything. And when you go back into government, you seem to know less to nothing, and you listen less of nothing.
It looks like the attitude changes based on their position in either opposition or in governance. Let me go to Kina. Kina, I just have a last question for you, and if you could summarize it for us in 2 minutes, it would be great. My earlier question of government's posturing and how it engenders confidence, also especially in their legislative function. Have they optimally performed their legislative function of scrutinizing statutory instruments and bills before passage?
Repeat that last part.
I'm sorry, do you want me to repeat that?
The last part, yes.
Right, I said especially their legislative function of scrutinizing statutory instruments and bills before they're passed.
Well, there's way more that needs to be done. Of course, up until this parliament, the same party held the majority and the executive every time. So this particular parliament is exciting. It's new. Ghanaians have voted differently. We want different things. That said, of course, no one wants physical assaults on the floor, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is the quality and the effectiveness and the inclusion of the representation. That's what we should look at. We shouldn't be so bothered by fisticuffs or anything like that. You want to look, because people can be well-dressed, well-spoken, well-attended, and come and pass laws that are not in our best interest, and in some cases actually lessen the quality of our lives. So what we should always be looking at is the quality of the representation. Our MPs and parliaments representing our interests. Are they looking for solutions? Are they opposing policies and bills that will further weaken our life in Ghana? This is the substance, because when you are politicking on parliament, not everybody is going to agree, and so there will be disagreement. But Ghanaians must always look at that at the end of the day. Does this thing that they've passed represent me properly? Does it solve a problem? And does it solve the problem in a way that makes my life better in Ghana? Because, we solve problems and make our life worse. This is what is, and the scrutiny, as you are saying, we've always said, Parliament can call on any civil society organization, any professional body. If something comes in front of them that they want clarity on, that they want to engage with the actual stakeholders of that sector. But a lot more work needs to be done. And we are at Sojiko, we are at all Ghanaians, we are very encouraged by the makeup of this parliament, and really we urge Ghanaians to continue to vote this way, because we've done the other part where the same party holds the majority in parliament and holds the executive. And so that people just, the parliament has always rubber stamped what the executive wants. Now we've done it differently, and we think that it's much healthier for Ghana, and perhaps going this route, we will get what we want out of it. We want the executive to be held to account. We want laws that make our lives better. Like the speaker said, we want arguments. We want informed. And we want arguments and positions that are informed by an ideological basis, but also are informed by the social and economic and cultural reality of Ghanaians' lives and move and what we do. We just want quality debate that meets Ghanaian lives and makes our lives better, because that's why they are there.
Thank you.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Arguments that reflect the reality of Ghanaian life. Eko, if you're there, I'll just take your very last remarks. I wish we could have heard more from you, but we had issues with your line earlier. The consensus is that we want to hear more from Parliament. We want to feel more from Parliament in the discharge of the duties that they were put there to discharge, and a greater representation of the people instead of just there to stamp what the executive says. Would you agree that there's room for them to do better here? Echo, can you hear me? Okay, Echo, I think we still have issues with your line, so I'll just go to Jonathan to give us those last remarks. Jonathan, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. The same question I was asking Echo, we can't hear him, so an expansion of their duties for Parliament to be able to do more, engage better with the citizens, represent the citizens more, is that what we are taking away?
I'm not too sure about that, but I will just say that it is still work in progress, and most likely we'll get there. Okay. But we are still far behind. Partisanship is killing us, and we cannot take away partisanship, but it should be done with superior argument and to ensure that the ordinary Ghanaian is, benefits from the kinds of policies and argument that they put across, and to ensure that there is that growth in our democracy.
Right. Thank you so much. Jonathan Santi is political analyst and senior lecturer at the University of Cape Coast. We're also joined by Kina Likimani, who is director of special programs at Odikuru. Eko Anan also joined us there. He's Vice Secretary, Parliamentary Press Corps. So we're just going to, of course, continue to bring you the updates on this and Parliament's engagement with the people in fulfilling their mandate. My name is Nwang Falong. Thank you for joining us on Spotlight on MX24 television. I'll see you again same time tomorrow, Friday, for the weekend edition of Spotlight. Good evening.